From WisPolitics in Madison, you're listening to Capital Chats.
Hello, everybody. This is Kate Morton with WisPolitics here with a Capital Chats podcast brought to you by Spectrum. Today I'm here in the Madison office with my colleague Adam Kellenhofer to talk about an interview he did with U.S. Representative Mark Pocan. So, Adam, how did that interview go?
Hi, Kate. Yeah, the interview went well. I got to talk to Pocan about the Israel-Hamas conflict. I thought it was interesting to get Pocan's perspective on this issue because he's been focused on this region for much of his career. We also talked about the House Speaker election, so let's just get right into things. Welcome to our show, U.S. Representative Mark Pocan. He's a Democrat from Madison, so welcome to the show, Mark.
Yeah, thanks, Adam. Glad to be here.
Awesome. So I first wanted to start off with the Israel-Hamas conflict. I know that you have been involved a lot with the Progressive Caucus and other memberships talking about Israel in the past. So I kind of wanted to get your perspective on what's going on with this whole conflict. So what are your general thoughts, basically?
Yeah, well, I've been to the region 3 times over my 11 years. So early on my freshman term, then went about halfway through, spent a little more time on the Palestinian side than the Israeli side. And then the last time was a couple of years back around this time of the year. So 3 different perspectives. And what's going on right now, I mean, clearly there was a horrific attack on Israelis by Hamas. Hamas being, by U.S. standards, a terrorist group, but it is also the governing entity in Gaza. Gaza is complicated to begin with. It's essentially an open-air prison, and 2.3 million people don't have access to go and come as they please. Most of the gates are held by Israel, a couple by Egypt. So it's already pretty rough conditions in Gaza. But Hamas doesn't do the people any favors in governing. And certainly in their attack, it was a horrific attack that we all saw on October 7th and, have spoken out against. Since then, Israel's been retaliating. The problem is, I don't think they're discerning the difference between Hamas and Palestinians who live in Gaza. There's 2.3 million people, half of which are kids in Gaza. And, now 10,000 deaths, over 4,500 kids killed. Clearly, kids are not terrorists, are not Hamas. So, that's a problem. And, now we're trying to speak out against that because, I think Israel has every right to surgically go after Hamas, who did the dreadful attack, but just collective punishment, which is what this appears to be. A quarter of the buildings in northern Gaza have been destroyed. We're now hitting refugee camps and things like that. This seems to be an overreaction, and this is where we're hoping the U.S. could step in and have more to say, that President Biden could really talk to them and try to, make sure they're getting humanitarian aid, which has largely been blocked for the 2.3 million people. Try to make sure there's humanitarian corridors for people, try to stop this wholesale bombing that appears to be occurring, and, really just try to stop loss of life, period. At the same time, there's still missiles coming out of Gaza at shooting at Israel. Fortunately, Israel has the Iron Dome, which we help fund, which is a defensive weapon that just takes those missiles out before someone's killed, and that's good. But, this is a problematic region that I've watched every time I've been there get a little worse. And, this, I think, is the culmination of a lot of that.
Yeah, it has certainly been a tumultuous area for a very long time. You mentioned Israel should do more targeted attacks against Hamas. How do you think, how should they go about, are there any specific tactics you want to see used by Israel that they're not using right now?
Well, I mean, they have supposedly the best intelligence in the world. They're one of the best intelligence agencies, although clearly this attack was missed. So I'm going to put an asterisk on saying that. But, they do know where tunnels are, and they do know where things are that most likely you're going to have people hiding. And you could use drones and other things for very specific targeted attacks that I don't think they're doing. What's happening right now is you're, taking out hospitals or schools or, bakeries, some of the few that are able to make bread right now in Gaza. And, it's those types of attacks, like literally when they're justifying a hospital because Hamas might be hiding in a part of it, you're still taking out a hospital, right? And that's a problem, especially when the type of bombs, the literally thousands and thousands and thousands of bombs that have been hurled there, that's of concern. So we just want it to be strategic and targeted towards Hamas. They have every right to go after the 1,000 people that were part of what committed that atrocity on the 7th of October. But 2.3 million people are clearly not Hamas, and I think the 10,000 lives seems to be being done in a collective punishment way, and I don't think that's a good approach.
Mm. Do you think the United States should intervene at all, or aid Israel, or work to kind of get rid of Hamas in any sort of way?
Well, I think we're very involved already, right? We help fund Iron Dome. We actually do fund a lot of their arms that they also have and use, and we're a very strong supporter of Israel financially, right? We provide a little bit of money, literally not even dimes on the dollar, probably pennies on the dollar to Gaza, specifically to UNRWA, the UN, to fund. UNRWA feeds about 1.2 million people a day. They school about 300,000 children, and they have some clinics. But if they weren't there, it would be Hamas doing that as the governing entity, and they don't do very much for the people in Gaza. So, I think the best thing we can do is the recently appointed a special envoy. Some of us have been asking that for years, to give it more attention to that region. But, really, we should be trying to bring folks together to peace and a ceasefire, and a place where you don't have missiles going into or out of anywhere in the region. And I think the U.S. could do more in that way. And I think the president really is the key person, because you're not going to see much come out of this dysfunctional Congress, but you could, the White House really does have the gravitas to affect more. And I think that's why we're often now writing letters to the president, trying to encourage him to do some of that.
Do you think the U.S., or would you support or oppose the U.S. Putting actual military boots on the ground in Palestine or Israel at all?
I don't think anyone's proposing that, but I wouldn't support that regardless, just like I don't support that in Ukraine. I think the problem is with the level of bombing and the way it's being looked at in the region, that could bring Hezbollah in and maybe Iran more directly in. And if that happens, then very likely, we could be asked to be there. I don't ever want to see a single American man or woman going, whether it be there or Ukraine or any other war, if we don't have to. So again, that's another incentive for the United States to say, look, this bombing is not accomplishing your goals. You're actually, bringing in potentially other countries. It's time to have a regroup of what you're trying to do. And I don't think we've ever seen what they want to do. And I think that is one of the things we're asking for right now. In fact, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Betty McCollum and I are doing a letter, and that's one of the asks is, what is the plan here? Because just blowing things up and killing kids isn't a plan, right? What does this look like? What does a victory look like? And what does this look like when it's all done? Just lately, we've started to see a few things, and so far those are pretty bad ideas. So all the more reason for the United States to be involved.
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting situation, and I do want to move on to the future of the House soon, but I have just a couple more questions about Ukraine. It does have to do with the House, though, still. So there have been proposals to split Ukraine and Israel aid for both the countries that are in conflicts. What do you think of that kind of proposal? Should those deals be split up?
Well, it's not traditionally done that when the president gives you a supplemental. In fact, if anything, I'm hearing from the Senate, they might combine the domestic supplemental with the security supplemental, which would be, I could see those separate because that's how the president gave them to us, but they may come as one big vote. So, the security supplemental has the bulk of it. I think 63 billion or so is Ukraine aid, and then another 14.3 or 14.5 is Israeli aid. About 10 billion is humanitarian aid. That's all for the entire planet for the next year. Isn't a very robust amount. And I wish that number was larger. And there's some border money also in the security supplemental. And then the domestic supplemental has childcare and some other issues. So I'm not sure. I think whatever the Senate does will be done with adults in the room, unlike the House, where, they started pulling something off and then saying you're going to have the IRS agents pay for it. I mean, I know it's a new speaker, but amateur hour is continuing here. So, we are counting on the Senate to probably give us whatever responsible package we'll be looking at.
You actually touched on my next question, the IRS funding, pulling IRS funding to kind of account for that funding for Israel at $14 billion. A lot of people have noted that that's going to reduce, the collections that IRS is able to bring in, which would reduce overall tax revenue. Do you have any thoughts about that kind of proposal to pull IRS funding?
Yeah, I mean, it's a bad idea, but isn't it ironic that the very people who fund Republican campaigns are the wealthy donors that won't have IRS agents looking at their taxes owed? Gee, I'm sure there's nothing to do with that fact. That's why it's a bad idea, right? I mean, we need to make sure that people who owe taxes pay taxes. It's often the wealthiest and some corporations that don't. And that's what a lot of these positions would do, is make sure people are paying their fair share like you and I do. And that's why I think it's a really bad idea.
Yeah. Okay. Now we can move on to the speaker election. Sure. So it took quite a while for Republicans to rally behind one person and elect them. Do you think, is that a sign that the House Republican Caucus is going to do a lot of important bills this session, or are they, going to struggle to rally behind things?
I think the chaos continues. You remember the thing, if you first you don't succeed, try again. Here we're try again. I think I'm forgetting my tries. Try again. That seems to be the mantra. We're doing right now. We're doing appropriation bills that are going absolutely nowhere because we didn't mark them to the agreement that we made when we lifted the debt ceiling. So I call this period fantasy Congress, for people who play fantasy football. At least they have fun doing it. We don't on playing fantasy Congress, but we're here a lot to do it. So this is my 9th week in a row here, not, back home getting around the district, hearing what people are thinking. But nonetheless, I'm guessing the sort of patheticness of this Congress will continue till the end of this session.
So I take it you're not hopeful the appropriations process is actually going to work as it previously did in past sessions under.
No, this is the first year. Even through Trump, we still got appropriations worked. It wasn't broken. I watched other committees where you'd go to your committee and your job was to essentially spit on your colleagues, and your mouth gets pretty dry doing that. And I'm on appropriations, and we never did that. We still had the one bill that absolutely has to pass, or the 12 bills really that have to pass, even if it comes in a different form. This session, that all got broke when Kevin McCarthy became speaker on the 15th vote. He gave away a lot to get to that point, including putting some of the most extreme members of his caucus on a committee that used to function, and now it doesn't. So that's part of why we're marking bills up against the agreement. The agreement was no riders, and they're throwing all kinds of riders around abortion and pride flags and diversity, equity, inclusion. But things ultimately aren't going to go anywhere because the Senate Republicans and Democrats are the adults, and they've passed bills. 24-4 was the worst vote I think they had in committee, and they had unanimous votes because they're doing their job. So my guess is, fortunately, the Senate, whatever they had, will ultimately be closest to what the final bills are that go through Congress. Unfortunately, for someone like me who respects the institution, I mean, the appropriations process this year has been broken like the rest of Congress.
So you mentioned former Speaker McCarthy. He had quite a few deals actually with the White House, long-term deals regarding funding to cut future funding in return for temporary funding, which that deal was broken or not, depending on who you ask. Do you think Mike Johnson is going to uphold those deals that McCarthy made with the White House, or is he going to renege on them?
But God knows, and I mean that actually real this time. It's not a figure of language. I think our new speaker, doesn't necessarily think he's bound by anything that Kevin had, but comes from a very extreme position in his caucus, and I'm not sure he's going to live up to the agreements. Even right now, we thought we were going to have a clean continuing resolution when he was running for speaker, and he's now talking about this laddered approach, which is have different bills at different dates, just so we can have more dysfunction on more dates. So no, it's a completely idiotic idea. And if they decide to go that path, he's clearly not going to live up to the agreement. So I don't know what to expect. The chaos in Congress continues. Just now we're in a sequel for the 19th vote, I guess, sequel. And but I don't think we quite know what the new speaker is going to do because he is so new.
Yeah. Well, it'll be very interesting to watch the House and the speakership, see where it goes in the near future. But that is all I have time for this episode of Capital Chat. So I very much appreciate you coming on the show today, Representative Pocan. It was a pleasure.
Yeah, no problem, Adam. Thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you. One sec.
Well, Adam, thanks for sharing that interview with us. But in the meantime, if our listeners want to learn more about the things going on in Washington, they can head to our website at wispolitics.com for our DC Wrap newsletter.
That's right, Kate. And it's important to note that's actually a free product. But for now, I'm Adam Kelnhofer.
I'm Kate Morton.
Thanks for tuning in to WisPolitics Capital Chats, brought to you by Spectrum.